So Rand, I want to bring you in there because you occupy this really small part of a Venn diagram, which is, as long as I've known you, somebody who has been obsessed about privacy and the consequences of the deconstruction of privacy, but at the same time obsessed with and preoccupied with technologies that are actually, in a lot of instances, stripping away privacy from people. And all the work you've done is to try and maybe not reverse that trend, but to use that technology in a different way. So building on Michelle's point, which is, to some extent, the world is becoming more aware of it. You're actually constructing commercial entities now to take advantage of that awareness, to the ability for people to make decisions that provide them privacy without necessarily diminishing the level of access to technology or capacity or utility that they might have. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've learned quite a few things on the way. The first one is that people don't actually care about privacy, which is exactly the reason why companies who are offering and building technologies should guarantee privacy by design. I think, the ideal scenario is not asking people to actively do things to protect their data, but rather for people to just go on and kind of like trust that the system is built in a way that doesn't negatively impact them. The same way that you can live in a city today, in Europe, for instance, without having to worry about, a war or being killed by someone or, anything really major. You shouldn't have to worry about what happens online with your privacy. And, the technologies to enable that are starting to appear. It's only really since the 80s that we've had this new modern way, for example, of doing encryption, which enabled communications to be secured. Prior to that, there was no way of doing it efficiently. This led, to a whole group of people starting to think about the implications of, encryption and cryptography on the internet. In the 80s, you had a group of people called the cypherpunks. The cypherpunks were a bunch of geeks and researchers in cybersecurity, cryptography, who talked about the future of what was the nascent internet. And from the group of cypherpunk, we had a lot of people create what we now consider to be base tools for privacy. Things like, encryption for emails, PGP. Things like, WikiLeaks, Assange was a cypherpunk. Bitcoin came out of a cypherpunk that we don't know, one or many cypherpunks. All of like the things
Definitely
around.
Definitely not Craig Rice.
Definitely not. That's for sure. So I think like the culture around it has been around for 40 years, but now it actually works.